Welcome. In this unit standard, we are going to be talking about applying principles of ethics in a business environment and how ethics have become the foundation of a stable financial services environment. Without ethics, there is no proper protection of the stakeholders in the financial services, whether you're talking about the companies themselves, the representatives, or the consumers. The government has to make sure that it has standards in place that are in line with its constitution to protect everyone who's involved when it comes to money. So this unit standard is quite long, but we are going to try and summarize it as much as possible, but to also not compromise the content and the context that is so significant for you as a person who's working in the financial services, because at the end of the day, you'll be quite responsible. This is also a good foundation for the RE5 and RE1 exams that are required for anyone who is operating in the financial services industry. It just shows that how significant these legislations are in terms of making sure that you know what is expected of you, what are your rights, what are the rights of the consumer and the whole industry at large. So let's go ahead. So when we are talking of ethics, we are talking of an umbrella. And in this context, in terms of the financial services, we are talking about the FASE Act that you would be very much aware of. And we'll be also talking about the money laundering, which is, the Financial Intelligence Sector Act, which is called FICA, and the Protection of Constitutional Democracy Against Terrorism, and then the Protection of Organized Crime, which is called POCA. So these are the main acts that we are going to be focused on, and these are the ones that are actually going to guide most of the content or the context that we are going to be discussing. So let's talk about ethics. What are ethics? Ethics are not feelings, they are not religion, they are not law, they are not following societal laws, but instead ethics are what is a continuous effort of studying our own beliefs and moral conduct, and that will live up to the standards that are reasonable and justifiable. So this is a collective effort from the rest of the society to look at what is actually, allowable, what is what is consistent with how we live and the standards, not only in a country like South Africa, but in the global society as well. There's been a move, not only in South Africa, but in the rest of the world, in the West as well, towards affirmative action, for instance, affirmative action in terms of making sure that, women are included, minor groups are included, to make sure that they are represented in the economy, in the mainstream economy. So those are some of the standards that are almost pushed by society, and certain case studies that are actually gone to court, or certain things that have been covered, significantly in the media. For instance, you would remember the Black Lives Matter, that has been making waves in the United States because of the perceived brutal killings of Black people in the United States. That's one example. So the ethics are almost like a collective effort towards those standards and beliefs that are actually guiding our moral compass as a people or as a society. So those are the ethics, and when we apply them, at a small scale, we would be talking about integrity, we're talking about values, we're talking about morals, principles, honesty, rights, fairness, responsibility, choice, and conscience. So all those things actually make up ethics. They are not one indicator. So you cannot say that your religion then forms part of your ethics. It could be a significant contributing factor, but you should also be observant of what is around you, and what the society is expected of you. Believing that you are living as part of a collective, you're not only living alone. So in the workplace, the company would also have its own code of conduct that enshrines its values. It will probably talk about integrity or whatever case may be. honesty towards clients, all those things being expectations that are expected from each and every employee of that particular company. And industry would have its own code of conduct and ethics, at large. A sector, will have its own. In the financial services industry, we've got the Financial Planning Institute as well, for instance, that has a code of conduct or ethics, that principles that are followed by everyone who's registered as a part of the Financial Planning Institute, to say that we adhere to certain standards that govern us, so people can trust us, people know what to expect from us, rather than just anyone who is just anywhere providing financial advice. So this is, putting a certain expectations from the consumers that are consuming the financial products from these professionals. So how do we measure ethics? We can have a self-assessment tool. We can have identifying ethical preferences, understand the determinants of those ethical preferences, and we have a broader ethical perspective. For instance, when we are talking in a group of people will have their own opinions, culture. For instance, we spoke about religion, but culture, contributes significantly. I mean, the issue of lobola, in African societies, or the dowry in Muslim societies, is something that is upheld very high, and it's a determined factor of what they perceive as moral values when you are taking a bride, and to such an extent that if lobola is not paid, then you are considered not married. Even if you've married, maybe let's say in a legal way, you've gone to court, and got married legally, but the elders, for instance, in that particular culture will still say that you are missing something, although that you've been married in a Western way. So there's a lot of contributing factors, including culture, and culture evolves over time. So that's why we say these are not things that are, put on a rock to say that they cannot be moved. Always, consistently, ethics are changing. As society change, as standards of morality change, as certain things become acceptable, as certain things become not acceptable, depending on where the society is going. So there's tools that can actually measure, the level of ethics and the determining factor, but that won't be the part of our scope. But those would be things that are actually available there to measure if your values are consistent. For instance, with a certain corporate company, they will give you a test and see, to which extent do you believe in the values that they actually believe in. So let's look at different ethical concepts. So we've got utilitarian ethics, we've got moral rights, and we've got justice. So at some stage, these feed on each other, but at other stages or in other instances, these would be in contradiction to each other. And let's go deeper into understanding what are, for instance, utilitarian ethics. So utilitarian ethics would be those ethics that are, actions are judged or as good or bad in terms of their effects. So this says actions are not just judged based on your actions, but in terms of their effects. Producing the greatest good for greatest number, is judged as a good action. This can be interpreted as the end justifies the means, for instance. If I may make an extreme example where other religions and other, belief systems would justify someone bombing themselves, to say that they are dying for their country, or they are dying for their religion and what they believe in. So that's their deep belief. It might be good, it might be perceived as good by other societal norms, but in their, in their society or in their environment, that is heroic. That is something that is celebrated. And, I've heard that other families that are left are actually being compensated for the heroic move of the person who has actually done that, So that is an extreme example of how utilitarian ethics can actually work, that they are saying that the end justifies the means, but in a just, for instance, a system like we have in South Africa, justice means that everyone has a right to life, for instance, and we'll talk about the Bill of Rights a little later. Everyone has a right to life, everyone has a right to security, and all those things. And if something that had to happen in our society, it would be considered, a no-no, an area that is a no-go, a crime, of major magnitude, especially in massive killings. The person or the people that are involved will go through a serious trial, So that is how we, would be perceiving that action. But in other societies, it would be considered completely different. And so let's look at moral rights. So in moral rights, individual personal rights should not be violated, to life and safety, to information, to privacy, to act in line with beliefs, freedom of speech, property, access to property, the right to have access to property. Sometimes moral rights conflict with utilitarian concept, as I mentioned previously, that if it's morally wrong, for instance, to take someone who is a child or a teenager, in our society. In other societies, it's completely normal and acceptable to take someone who is a child or a teenager. In other societies, it's acceptable to actually take what is called a back pocket or a brown envelope, or something that will encourage someone to do something on your behalf, especially in a business environment. In South Africa, that is called a bribe, to a large extent. Doesn't matter how it happens. It's perceived in a different way than in other societies. So those were some examples of how moral rights can actually conflict with the utilitarian ethics. So let's look at the justice system. What does the justice system say? Benefits and burdens should be allocated fairly. So the justice is all about justness in judging and balancing the scale, that have the rights of the other person not been, impeded on? Have they not been, violated? Social and economic inequalities must be dealt with. Affirmative action, for instance, is another example. Equal pay for equal work. That is justice. That is bringing democracy and equality to all. That's how the system of justice will work. So if a judge is presiding in a court, that is trying to bring just and fairness, they will look at the evidence from both sides and try and understand the context and see, if the rights of another person have been affected, and how the person can actually be compensated. It means to be brought back into justness. For instance, the loss of life cannot be brought back, but we can definitely bring the person who actually violated that person to book. So that's what the justice systems actually is required to do. So let's look at the hierarchy of ethics. First and foremost, the SA Constitution would be the biggest or the greatest law in the land, the South African Constitution, or any constitution in any land, that enshrines the rights of all people, but that also defines on how law is about to be applied in the country. And then in our context, the company code of conduct, mission and vision, those will be in the guidance of ethics, and then the phase code of conduct, and then the FPI also will be a contributing factor in how the professionals are expected to act in that particular industry, especially when we talk in the context of financial services environment. So let's look at the Constitution. What does the Constitution embrace, or what does it have in terms of values? It protects the values of human dignity, of non-racialism, non-sexism, and it's the supreme law of the country. And then the Bill of Rights also has the limitations of rights. And then we look into details in terms of the Bill of Rights. So the Bill of Rights talks about the right to equality, that everyone has to be treated equally. No one has to be discriminated upon because of their, their gender, their race, their sexual orientation, or so forth. Human dignity must be protected, shouldn't be discriminated for whatever reason. Human life, that's why when a life is lost, it's still the biggest thing, or the biggest violence that can actually happen into any society, or in our society, for instance, because it's protected in the Constitution that anyone has a right to life, a right to security, right for protection. That's why the police are there. It's their duty to protect the citizens of the country, because it's enshrined in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, right to privacy. And this is a big thing in the financial services industry. POPI is there to protect the personal protection of information, that any usage of information is done in a way that is protected. It means that people must have consented to the protection, or to the usage of their information, and to certain standards. It means there's certain things that you can do with the information if you have it at hand, and there's certain things that you cannot do. So that will be enforced significantly, especially from June 2021. So that is a great example of the privacy, and how the Constitution is protecting our privacy as citizens. And then we've got the freedom of belief, which comes from a freedom of religion, a freedom of expression, freedom of having any language, and all the official languages, 11 official languages in South Africa must be embraced. Some are going extinct. That's why other cultural groups or language groups can come into a constitution and challenge, if they see that most of their languages are being, forcefully cut from the mainstream. Freedom of culture, freedom of assembly, people gathering and picketing, that is also enshrined and protected by the Constitution. Freedom of association, of movement, of trade, occupation, of labor, of environment, property, housing, access to housing, which is a big thing in the rest of the continent, not only in South Africa, that a lot of people are in destitute circumstances where they need proper housing. I think this actually talks to human dignity as well, where people don't have proper housing, they live in shacks. Some of them actually are citizens, but they live in tents, as if they are housed somewhere temporarily. So that is it talks to inequality, and that's where the government must make sure that using its own resources, it protects the rights of its citizens. Freedom to access health, education, and access to information as well. All these things are actually enshrined in the Bill of Rights, which is Chapter 2 of the Constitution. So let's look at the issue of ethics and law. PPR and phrase, for instance, they protect the rights of consumers, and phase provides guidelines for ethical behavior for the financial planners. SAQA provides for the right to education, and Access to Information Act provide for the rights of the individual. FICA and POCA legislate ethical behavior as well. So those are the things that are balancing out between ethics and the law, or where ethics can actually be made an act and a law to enforce certain standards that are desired from certain individuals or a society at large. Ethics and code of conduct, ethical dilemma. We look at the solutions, what are the guidance is there? We measure ethical behavior, consequences, support, and the training that is there. So what is, if we are looking at an ethical dilemma, in a certain industry, what kind of guidelines could we be looking at? How do we measure that ethical behavior? What are the consequences if someone is not behaving ethically? What is the support that is there? And what is the training? For instance, if this is looking at a particular company or industry, this, for instance, the FSCA, the Financial Sector Charter Act, is there, or authority is there to actually make sure that all the people that are in the financial services industry adhere to certain ethical standards. And if they are not adhering to certain ethical standards, but it also goes deeper in regulating the banks in terms of legislation. But all these things then go down into the code of conduct in the FPI, Financial Planning Institute, that we spoke about, and it provides guidance, and there'll be then tools of measuring those ethical behaviors. And if we are found to be outside of that ethical behavior, there needs to be consequences. Sometimes it's a penalty, sometimes it's a jail sentence if something that is covered in the act. If it's something that is minor, it can be controlled at the industry level or at a company level. Then they can provide support and the training that's required to make sure that the person is equipped and understand what is expected of them as a professional. So company, for instance, an example of a company's code of conduct will usually contain a conduct business in a professional way, ethical standards, treat people fairly and honestly, treat client with care, integrity, and in the best interest. Do not find yourself in a compromise where talking to clients in a certain way that is not professional. For instance, sexual harassment is a big thing between the clients, and their suppliers or service providers. Sometimes unfairly that after taking the money of a particular client, that then the company is not responding in queries that are being made by the client. So certain things, such things would be enshrined in the code of conduct of a company. Communicate simply and clearly with clients, provide written information or statements. So all these things pertaining to a particular company and what they foresee or that they perceive as needs or foreseeable problems, then they put ethics in place or code of conduct in place to manage and guide the context in which they actually work with. As he continues, company code of conduct will have security of clients' information, disclose any conflict of interest, treat suppliers fairly, provide safe working conditions, recognize obligation to general public. Those would be some of them. And the phase general code of conduct will have fairness, due skill, and in the interest of the client, factually correct and in plain language. Whatever that is being written is actually factually correct and it's in plain language that is understandable. Understanding that especially South Africa as being a developing country, a lot of people still don't have a English as their first language, so they wouldn't understand certain things, especially terms, legal terms that even someone who's educated will struggle understanding. Those need to be put in plain understanding. In fact, this is actually protected under the rights to access to information. That information must be made plain and simple. In fact, you have a right to ask for a contract in your own language as well. You have a right to take that information, a contract, and read it, and for 48 hours before signing it. So those are things that are there that phase code of conduct is protecting or making sure that in dealing with clients as a representative or as a company, the customers are actually protected. And in two ways, in both ways, that the representative is also protected, because you don't want clients complaining and saying that, no, we did not understand, which might cause conflict, which might end up with clients complaining and putting things on the media, and things can, spiral out of control. So this is very important for all parties. Adequate and appropriate information, time usually to allow client to make informed decision, disclose personal interest or conflict of interest. For instance, if you are an advisor and you are being paid a higher commission for certain products, it's very important that you become open, that you don't sell things because of the amount of commission that you are getting from that particular company or that particular product. Everything needs to be disclosed, and so that the client can actually be treated fairly. And then this phase code of conduct continues. Transactions must be recorded. It's very important to keep audit trail. Systems and procedures are in place. Privacy of clients' information, disclosure of FSP details and situation. So the financial services provider, the FSP license number needs to be there. There's a lot of people that are running fly-by-night type of companies, saying that they will, for instance, the Bitcoin has actually brought a rise to a lot of people that say they trade on behalf of other people without being licensed with the financial sector charter, so that becomes a serious problem. And, it's important that the license is there of the service provider, of the representative. If you're working under supervision, you need to indicate that you're working under supervision, but who is the principal, who is licensed, and if there's any, and actually provide a license number to particular. This is not a common practice, and I guess it's being encouraged by the circumstances in which we find ourselves in, where people then go back to the regulator and say, there have been people that are dubious, that took a lot of money from me. A lot of people that are saying they are trading Forex, actually not regulated. We say them in newspapers. So this becomes very important because of these things. Disclose information about products, details about products. What are the actual fees? Normally we talk about only the good things, and we don't talk about the costs of certain products. So that is unethical. In terms of code of conduct of phase, we need to disclose everything. Phase rules on advice: gather appropriate information, gather as much information that is required for the decision that needs to be made. Conduct an analysis, identify a range of products that could be used, make full disclosure in these products, ensure the client understands the solution, and keep a record of this advice. So these are the advice, the rules on providing advice. For instance, a lot of financial planners don't understand the credit report. And I don't understand how can you actually provide financial advice when you have not seen a credit report and you have not taken into consideration what are the financial needs of a particular client, to make sure that the affordability is there to be able to pay back this money. It's not only good for the client to sustain the policy, but it's good for the advisor as well, to make sure that this transaction, first of all, it's ethical. It's not biased towards the financial advisor who is doing this for a commission, but it's a relationship that will continue for a long time. It's not looking at rewarding only the person who sells, but also the person who's buying, and looking at the needs of the person who is buying. So that's why it needs to conduct analysis, identify a range of products, not only a product that will benefit the financial advisor, make full disclosure of these products, ensure the client understands the solution. It's very, very important. A significant number of clients say they would rather get advice from a relative because they don't trust financial advice. And this is for the same reason that it has become a culture that financial advisors provide advice at their own interest, not in the interest of the client. So ensure that the client understands the solution. A lot of people, in fact, there's been a research that has been done that some products, for instance, retirement annuities, have been made to be very difficult because they have been made to not be understood easily. And if they are not understood easily, then that means that they are actually going to be bought but not understood. And, by the time that the people need to, get what they went in for, they not get they are not getting what they are went in for, or what they bought, because they did not understand. Some financial advisors don't understand a lot of the investment products, for instance, that they are selling. They're just selling for the sake of attracting clients and making a commission. So it's very important that you as a financial advisor understand what you are selling, and you're able to communicate it to clients in a manner that they understand, in a context that they understand. And it's exactly what they want and not what you want. And keep the record of this advice, very important as well. Phase rules as they continue, rules for custody of documents, that the documents need to be kept for a certain amount of time. I know that it's a standard in the industry to keep records for about 3 to 5 years. rules of holding funds, who can hold funds, not everyone can actually hold funds. For instance, if you have got an advisory license, you cannot hold funds because you are not a fund manager. Risk management rules that are there, to make sure that, the funds of the people that are there or their documents, everything is actually managed and protected. Advertising and direct marketing rules. So there's, the rules that you cannot promise. For instance, there's the fact that people say certain things. I mean, they'll talk about returns that are like double-digit returns within a certain amount of time. Exaggerated returns are not allowed, for instance, in terms of advertising. You need to advertise what is there, what is allowable according to the law, what is possible as well, and not what is fictitious in the name of advertising, and making sure that that the pockets of the certain people are filled. Complaints handling system and the ombud. What is the internal complaints handling system that does not discriminate against a person? If the person complains, they don't feel discriminated or they don't feel violated or threatened when they complained. There's a system that they are channeled to, which is independent, which will investigate the case thoroughly and make sure that the people are compensated if there is a case. If there isn't a case, then still what has been found is communicated. Maybe there was a certain misunderstanding about a certain thing. And the ombud, which is there to be an independent party, to rule in the industry where there has been, conflicts. The ombud is made known to the particular client as a channel of resolving any conflicts. Termination of business and the waiver of rights, for instance. The client needs to be made aware, in terms of the termination of business and the waiver of certain rights that they have, all those things need to be there when you are selling products. Then there's industry rules. You must comply with industry codes if selling their products. There's ASISA, for instance. Previously, it was the LOA, Life Officers Association, and it was also the Association of Collective Investment Schemes. Code of Conduct also has its own code of conduct. The banking industry has its own code of conduct. The South African Institute of Financial Market has its own short-term medical council of code of conduct. All of them have their own code of conducts that are related and will be linked to some extent to phase. Would be guided by the industry, umbrella as a phase to say what is expected of them, but will focus on certain areas that are likely to happen or to cause conflict between the client and the service provider. The FPI code of conduct talk about knowledge and skill, and you hear most of these because the overarching umbrella being phased, most of these would be very common, would be very consistent and not in conflict. Knowledge and skills, that making sure that the representative or the company has significant resources of knowledge and skills to provide whatever advice. Relationship, there must be a relationship with that client, not a one-off that is commonly known where the client only buys a product and that will be the end of the relationship. Again, relationship with the industry, understand where the industry is, the rules that are changing, the ethics that are changing, general behavior that is expected out of the financial advisor or the service provider, disciplinary measures that are there, generally accepted planning practice. So all these things are under the FPI code of conduct that will then guide on how a professional who is registered with the FPI needs to behave. Professional codes of conduct. If you belong to a membership or professional body, you must comply with their codes. The FPI has its own, LUASA has its own, the Institute of Insurance South Africa has its own code of conduct. All of these actually have their own separate code of conduct. So it's important that if you're a professional and you belong to any of these, you make sure that that you comply with with the code of conduct that is linked to your profession. And then the CFP has a 6-step process: establish a professional relationship, gather data and goals. Like I said, these actually sound more of the phase step-by-step process of providing advice. Gather data and goals, analyze and evaluate, develop and present recommendations, implement recommendations, monitor. Most of these in full extent will be in your material, so I shall not go into them. For instance, establish a professional relationship. So this talks about a financial planner should clearly explain or document the service to be provided, define both your responsibility, you as a financial planner, and the responsibility of the client in providing accurate information. For instance, explain fully how they will be paid and by whom, the financial planner, who is going to be paying you. The client is not paying, for instance, they are paying through a commission that is taken from the sale of the product. Agree on how long the professional relationship will last and how the decision will be made. So if the relationship is going to last for 5 years, maybe sometimes the relationship is guided by the length of the product. So if, for instance, you're taking an endowment and the life of the product is 5 years, it means it will be guided by that. Segmenting the market to ensure that we are able to focus on our marketing efforts or our marketing efforts. So making sure that you are dealing with a certain market that you know, that you understand. Continuing with establishing a professional relationship, planning and market segmentation, targeting specific clients, prospecting, making contact with particular clients, phoning for appointments, individual life cycle, looking at the life cycle of the client. Where is the client? What are their needs? And what can you actually provide? There's another unit standard that deals with the actual life cycle, so we won't go into detail with that. What are the social styles? Is this person an expressive person? Are they an introvert? And so that you can deal with them in the manner that they understand and the manner that they are comfortable. Professionalism and the image of you as a financial planner. What is the professional standard that is expected of you? And the image that you must present, always needs to be professional. Know when to call when you are phoning. You cannot just call in the evening, unless you've made an agreement with the person that I will call later. Gathering data, including goals. Ask for information about financial situation. Should know how to ask for information without making the person feel intimidated or, making them feel small. Maybe they've got issues with debts. You should be able to know what happens then if the client actually is over indebted. If the person is wealthy and they've got a lot of money, should not make them uncomfortable. For instance, if they tell you that they've got millions in their accounts, your expression should not be that of someone who's seeing a jackpot, but you should be there as a professional who is available to assist them and who's knowledgeable to help them to grow their money, protect their money as well. Define your professional and financial goals, personal and financial goals, so it's important that the person speaks about their goals. It's important. It's the client's goals. It's not you as a financial planner goal. And it's very important to listen and to ask questions strategically at this particular time. If it's open-ended questions, if it's, just open questions where you allow the person to express themselves and be able to gather some facts and data from there, do that. The time frame for the results in terms of the returns, how long maybe they are willing to put the money away, the risk that they are willing to take, gather all the necessary documents and information as well, FICA documents, everything that is required to provide the client with the information or with the financial advice. Gathering data, including goals as it continues, introducing to sales process. You need to tell the client how the sales process is going to unfold. After doing this assessment, you're going to come with recommendations. After recommendations, the client will pick a product, will sign certain documents which are binding them, all those things, all the certain process with other service providers. That after the client has signed, they get a courtesy call from someone who will then explain further, in terms of the process of withdrawing the funds if they need them and all those things. The session is to be client focused, like we mentioned. The questioning techniques, like I mentioned as well, being open-ended or closed-ended. Financial fact finding, making sure that you are able to gather data of facts about the client. For instance, the big thing about unclaimed benefits in the country, which are worth billions of rands. A lot of clients have left money with pension funds, provident funds, that have not been claimed. Others have money from their deceased relatives, but those monies should be going to them, but they don't know. It's the role of the financial advisor. Find out any other data, obviously at the consent of the client. Find any other data that can actually benefit the client, but also that could be that help, and understanding the whole picture of where the client actually is. Understand the buying motives. Why do they want to buy what they are buying? Uncover and develop needs, even the things that they are not saying. Test solutions and see what works. Use scenario planning, for instance. If you had to do this and this, would this give the results that are actually needed? There's another standard that talks about scenario planning that would actually come handy in being strategic in providing financial advice. Analyze and evaluate your financial status. This talks about analyzing information to assess current situation, determine what must be done to meet goals. This could include analysis of assets, liabilities, cash flow, current, and you need to be very familiar with these things. There's another UN standard that talks about such details. If you don't know what assets are, everything that the person owns that generates an income in terms of an accounting definition. An asset is something that grows in value or that generates income. Property would be a form of asset. A car, even if it's not generating any income, but it's an inconvenience type of an asset because it could be sold for return in value. Furniture and liabilities are the debts, obviously. And the cash flow looks at what is coming in and what is going out. Besides, you could have a net worth. It means you are worth $1 million, but you don't have money in the bank account. It means there's no cash flow. There might be assets, but there's no cash flow, which could be a very negative thing, either for a business or for an individual. Current insurance, if they do have any insurance, look at what they have, what is the shortage. That is the objective of doing an analysis. Investment tax strategies that are there to make sure that the person pays as manageable as little tax as possible, because that's the whole objective of doing financial planning as well. Analysis and evaluating your financial status. So this looks at the needs analysis tools. So there'll be a tool, that is, each company actually has. Some companies have different type of tools that have certain details that check for the needs analysis and calculate the shortfalls in terms of death. If the person passes on as a breadwinner, for instance, do they have cover for disability, for retirement, for investment goals, education, etc. Tax and estate planning. Develop a written proposal back to the client based on the analysis that has been done. Developing and presenting a recommendation, how you go about, you offer a financial planning recommendation that address goals, so this is not about you, remember that. The financial recommendations are actually addressing the goals based on the information that has been gathered. Based on the information you provide, help the client to understand the recommendations, put the client in a position to make informed decisions, listen to clients' concerns, and devise recommendations as appropriate. So it's not the be all and end all what you are saying. It's important to gather the data, and it's important to pay attention. Even if the client does not talk a financial language, you need to be able to pay attention and understand what they need, because at the end of the day, it's their money. You are there to serve them as a service provider. So develop presenting recommendations, presentation skills. It's very important that your the data is neat when it's presented. It's articulated well in a manner that is going to be received, even if the person, like we say, doesn't understand financial jargon. It's brought down to their level. Written report writing skills is important, that you are able to do that as you report back. Maybe with the performance, you're able to interpret that information back to the client. Implementing the financial planning recommendations, agree on how the recommendations will be carried out. Carry out the recommendation, serve as client's financial coach. It's important. That comes from a relationship. Most of the time, it doesn't work that way. The fact that the financial planner is being paid on a monthly basis means that they owe a duty to the client to encourage them, to direct them in whatever financial needs or financial goals, financial aspirations that they have. It's very important. Other people don't understand what coaching is, so they are just there to, make quick money and run off. Coordinating the whole process with client and other professionals such as attorneys or stockbrokers. So if, for instance, the client is in high net worth, they need estate planning and you cannot provide, it's not your expertise. You get a tax expert to help with the tax. Get an attorney to help with the will. Get a stockbroker to help with investing in the stock market. It's very important to gather yourself with these kind of professionals. Sometimes they are in this company that you're actually providing advice for or you are working for. So it's very important that you provide the client the best. If you have got a limitation of information, say it in a professional way, not in a way that undermines you as a professional. Gather the professionals that you need and provide the best to the client. It sustains the relationship as well. Implementation of financial planning recommendations continue. Present a written financial proposal to the client. Look at objections that are there and how do you handle those objections. Clients read on their own. Information has become very much accessible to clients. They can just Google things, and if you're a financial planner and you're not doing your homework, then you'd be caught very easily. Close or suggest an appropriate commitment, complete documentation and submission. Talk about the submission process that needs to come from there. Monitoring the financial planning recommendation, agree on who will monitor the client's progress towards their goals. Obviously, most of the time, it will be you as a financial planner. If the planner is in charge of the process, he should report to the client periodically to review the situation. Normally, 6 months is recommended. Make adjustments to the recommendations if needed as client's life changes. So treat each and every client like a high net worth client. Basically, that's what it says. You will never know what happens. Anyway, we owe all our clients a duty to, to provide the best. It doesn't matter how much we are getting from them. We should treat all the clients fairly and equally. Continuously after sales client service, what do you do with the after sales? What do you do? Do you have a courtesy call each and every 2 months, each and every quarter, for instance? Do you give them a direct email which they need to call or which they need to email if they've got problems? All those things. Just don't dump a product and run away. The image that is being left, handling difficult clients, appropriate language that is being used, assertive behavior, regular contact with the client. So all these things contain the integrity and the brand of the particular financial advisor. The brand of the company that you work with or you work for could be there, but it is you who has got a personal relationship with the client to make sure that this is being sustained and the client continues to be happy with the service. In terms of compliance manual, what is the compliance function, the compliance culture to be in line with the international trends, effective complaints handling, complaint monitoring. So all these things need to be contained in the compliance manual of each and every representing company or company that is providing financial advice or that is providing financial services. What is the compliance function? The culture needs to be communicated to everyone in the company, and it needs to be in line with international trends. It does not need to be, behind, for instance, and there's an effective complaints handling internally also needs to be in the compliance manual. And there's a compliance monitoring method, that is also known by everyone in the company to make sure that everyone adheres to the compliance requirements. Other companies are being monitored by, there's a compliance officer that comes and checks if the checks and balances, the document is there, is being updated according to the standards of the industry. So the compliance officer will be there to make sure that everything has been adhered to. Code of conduct, case studies. Can a member of the API advise a client on products they are not qualified or licensed to market, for instance? That's a question. Must they advise the client the products they are allowed to market? So that's the question that I'm posing to you. And as we are closing off this unit standard, we should make sure that there's a lot of these case studies that we can look at and